Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahmavidvaram. Namah Shri Shankarananda Guru Padambujanmane Savila Samaha Graha Grasaika Karmani. Okay, so let us read the verses that we covered before. We're gonna just read them and then we're gonna go forward. So we're going to verse from number 19. Maya vrityatmako hisha sankalpa sadhanam jano mano vrityatmako jīva sankalpo bhoga sadhanam isha nirmitamanyadau pastunyeka vidhe sthite भोक्तृधिवृत्तिनानात्वात् तद्भोगो बहुदेष्यते ऋष्यत्येको मणिं लब्ध्वा क्रुध्यत्यन्यो ह्यलाभतः पश्यत्येव विरक्तोऽत्र न ऋष्यति न कुप्यति प्रियो प्रिय उपेक्षश्चेति आकारामणिगास्त्रयः सृष्टा जीवैरीश सृष्टं रूपं साधारणं त्रिषु भार्या स्नुषा ननान्दा च याता मातेत्यनेकधा प्रतियोगी धिया योषिद भिद्यते न स्वरूपतः ननु ज्ञानानि भिद्यन्ताम् आकारस्तु न भिद्यते योषिद्वपुषतिशयः न दृष्टो जीवनिर्मितः मैवं मांसमयी योषित काचिदन्या मनोमयी मांसमय्या अभेदेति भिद्यते हि मनोमयी. So, in this particular verses that we saw last time, Swami Vidyaranya Ji, what he's trying to do is establish really where bondage lies. Where does bondage lie? And he says, look, in the actual objects of creation, whatever has come through creation, they come through what is called Maya Vritti. Maya Vritti here means they come through the sankalpa, or it's the nature of Ishvara to express this whole world. But when we talk about making these objects our enjoyment or experiencing these objects, these come through our vritti, manovritti. So one is called Maya Vritti, which means it's the nature of Ishvara to express this way. And one is called manovritti. When I take an object and I begin to put all of my biases, my perceptions, my superimpositions in it. What is an example? So he gives an example of a gem. Now, a gem is a natural substance, and people may have different reactions to the gem. So somebody might, on attaining a gem, maybe like a diamond, on attaining a diamond, somebody might feel very happy. On not obtaining it, or not getting it, some might feel sad. And there might also be people who are just indifferent. Whether they have it or not, it doesn't really matter. Having it doesn't make them happy. Not having it doesn't make them sad. So in this way, the gem as it is what we call Ishvara sṛṣṭi, but the different emotions that we have towards that gem are called jīva sṛṣṭi. And therefore, he says all of these feelings come to that. And not only that, but even personal relations. Anybody that we see that's in front of us, a relative, a mother, a friend, a spouse in front of us, they may be the same person, but everybody looks at them in different angles. You know, one may be a father to a child, but when he goes to work, that same man is a boss. And when he goes to visit his parents, he's a son. So yes, it's the same. The Ishvara sṛṣṭi is the same physical form and name may be outside, but the relationships that people have and the mental thoughts they have about the person is different inside. So Ishvara sṛṣṭi is really what's outside, and Jīva sṛṣṭi is what's inside. And even for that person, they also will feel different emotions for different people. So this is what Swami Vidyaranyaji is trying to establish. Now, an objection comes and says, okay, fine, there are different relations, right? Whether it's a man or a woman. If it's a woman, she can be seen as a mother or a daughter or as a friend, a spouse. But he says, I don't see any change in the physical creation. So I don't believe in jīva sṛṣṭi. I don't believe in the creation of jiva because I'm not seeing any physical change in that person or that being. So therefore, this jīva sṛṣṭi, I don't think it really exists. I don't know what it is. So the answer was, ma evam, it is not so. Because the woman or the person, every person has two bodies, okay? One is called mamsamayi, the fleshy body, and one is called manorājya, the mind body. Or one is a gross body and one is a subtle body. So even if the gross body isn't really different, the subtle body is. And therefore, there is a jīva sṛṣṭi. So that's where we left off. Now, there's going to be various objections and replies. So I'll just read the verses one time and we'll go through them. There's going to be various objections to this thing called jīva sṛṣṭi. And Swami Vidyaranyaji answers it very, very well. And we'll see what those are. So we're on verse 26 now. Bhrānti svapna manorājya smṛtishvastu manomayam jagran manena meyasya namanomaya chet. So he says here that, listen, I don't think that there's anything called jīva sṛṣṭi. Why is that? He says, look, I'm going to name you these various states. One state is called Bhrānti. Bhrānti means the state of delusion. So first state. Next, svapna, dream. Manorājya, daydream. And smṛti, and memory. In all of these, I agree that there's a mental creation. In all of these, astu manomayam, there's a mental creation, right? But jagran manena meyasya. Meya here means of the objects. Meyasya, of the objects. Meya is short for prameya. Manena. Manena is short for pramana. So of the objects that are known in waking state, namanomaya chet means it is not mental. Namanomaya chet. So here, let's think of these four states. Bhrānti, delusion. Delusion is like on a rope, I see a snake, right? So there's a rope there, and then I'm superimposing the snake. So the snake is not really outside, it's inside my head, and I'm superimposing it. So yes, there's a mental creation there. Swapna, dream, I dreamt of an elephant. I dreamt of an elephant in the forest. So it's not really outside, it's in my mind. It's there in my mind. Manorājya, daydream, same thing. We can dream of going somewhere, eating something, meeting someone. That person or that place is again a mental creation. And smṛti, memory, that person might not be in front of us right now, but I have a thought of remembrance of the person. So of somebody I physically know, I know somebody that physically exists, not like dream or daydream or delusion where it doesn't exist, but somebody actually exists, but they're not physically in front of me, and I just have a thought of them. I kind of just remember them. That's called memory. And in all of those, yes, there's a mental creation. The pūrva pakṣa, or the objection, the objection is about that's absolutely fine. But when you come to waking state, how do you say that jiva has a mental creation? How do you say that jiva is mentally creating things? Because I did not mentally create this. I did not mentally create the bottle in front of me or the computer in front of me. How do you say that the jiva is mentally creating? What do you mean by this? This is the objector's point of view. Now, let's see what Swami Vedāntic replies, and let's see his thought flow. On verse 27 now. Padham manetu me yena yogat syad vishaya kritihi bhashya vartikakarabhyam ayamartha udiritaha. So he says, Bard. Okay, I accept your objection. True, Bard, true. Mane, meaning in the context of the antakarana. So here I'll explain something first. When we say the word pramana, pramana usually means of knowledge, the means of knowledge. So usually when we talk about means of knowledge, there are 6 means of knowledge, which we have seen before in Panchadashi as well. And one is called pratyaksha, direct perception. Another is called anumana, or inference. Another one is called upamana. We know through comparison. If somebody says, buy me a tangerine. What is a tangerine? Well, you show them an orange and you say, it looks like this. One is called arthapatti, which is postulation. You postulate. If you see that the ground is wet, you postulate it could have rained. So arthapatti. And there's also something called anupalabdhi, where you know by absence, right? If somebody's not here, then I can comprehend their absence. And the 6th one is shabda pramana, understanding through hearing, through a secondary source. It can be news, or it can be somebody teaching us. It's called shabda. Now, in all of these means of knowledge, one thing is for sure, it takes place through thought. Even if I see something in front of me, it takes place through thought. If I'm comparing something, inferring something, postulating something, it takes place through thought. So here, when the word pramana, which in short is mana, mane, it means the thought, the antakarana, the inner equipment. So mane, in the context of that thought, tumeyena, with the object yogat syat. So basically, when the thought unites with the object, Vishaya kritihi. There is an akritihi. There's a form of the object. When the thought unites with the object, then there's a form that's created. How do we know this? Udiritaha. It is said where bhāsyavartika-karabhyam. It is said by Bhāshyakara. Bhāshyakara is Adi Shankaracharya ji. In his work called Upadesha Sahasri, he has talked about this principle. And Vartikakara is Sureshwaracharya. He has also talked about this principle in his text called Manasolasa. So he's going to cite both what Adi Shankaracharya ji says and what Sureshwaracharya ji says. He says, Ayam Artha, this process by which an object is known has been cited, and I'm going to put the verses so then we can really see how is it that we know an object. And when we talk about knowing an object, there's definitely a mental thought required. Because nothing is known without a thought. And this process is going to be explained now further. So here it says true. Acharya Shankara, Sureshwara, and others acknowledge the fact that the mind assumes the form of the external object with which it comes into contact and modifies that form to suit its purposes. So let's see the examples now. There are two examples given by Adi Shankaracharya ji. On verse 28. Bhusha siktam yatha tamram tannebham jayate tatha rupadin vyapnuvat chittam tannebham drishyate dhruvam. So here, Adi Shankaracharya ji gives a nice example. Says yatha, yatha, just as tamram. Tamram means copper. Musha siktam. It is poured into a mold. Just like copper is poured into a mold. Tannibham jayate tatha. Then it takes the form. Tannibham jayate means it takes the form of it. Rupadin vyapnuvat chittam. In the same way, chittam. Chittam here means the mind. Chittam vyapnuvat. It pervades the form. Tannibham drishyate dhruvam. And it takes the form. Tannibham drishyate dhruvam. It takes that form certainly. So Sri Shankara says that just as melted copper assumes the form of the mold into which it is cast, the mind assumes the form of the object perceived by it. The very interesting topic now comes is, how do we really know anything in life? How do we know? How do we experience anything? So first, let's look at the copper example, and then we will look at our lives. Copper example is, there's melted copper, just melted copper. And that melted copper, you pour it into a mold, and when you pour it into a mold, it takes the shape of the mold. It sort of takes that entire shape, and that's what the copper assumes. It assumes that form. It assumes that shape. It assumes everything on that, based on that object where you poured it into, right? So there's this copper that's maybe in liquid form, and the minute you pour it, it takes up the form, the name, the shape of that object. Now, when we live day to day, we walk around so many places. We do so many things, we meet so many people, but we're not really experiencing every single one. You might walk in the city streets and there might be 100 people there, maybe 100 people there, but we're not experiencing every single one. Or when we go into a grocery store and we're buying something, we're not experiencing the whole entire aisle of the grocery, what's there, what's happening, right? We're just experiencing what are thought envelopes. And this process will be explained, but I'll tell you so that it's very clear. It's like this. There is what we call the chidabhasa, or the reflection of consciousness. So of course there is consciousness, there's a reflection of consciousness, but when this reflection of consciousness rides the thought in the mind, then it, so to say, envelopes the object, and that's how we know it. A great example is a torch. That's a torchlight. Just imagine a torchlight. Now the torchlight, let's say, is that reflection of consciousness, chidabhasa. And the torchlight, when it beams forth, like the light beams forth, that's called the thought. So the reflection of consciousness is the torch, and the beam of light is the thought. Light will be the next example. The beam of light is a thought. And as it goes out, it envelopes the object. It lights up the object. Without it lighting up the object, we wouldn't know it. We wouldn't experience it. So therefore, every object is only experienced because of thought. Because of thought. If the mind is not there, then there's no experience of any object. There's no experience of any world in front of me. Only when the mind is active and the mind actually, so to say, goes out and pervades the object, I have an experience of it. So first thing is, when my mind is there, then I have an experience of the world. And when my mind pervades that particular object, particular person, particular instance, then I really experience it. Otherwise, I wouldn't experience it. This is the process of knowledge. This is how we know. So he gives this example of the copper, right? Now, subtler is going to give the example of light. I just shared it with you, but again, he's going to share it and we'll see what he says. 29, he says, Vyanjako va yatha lokaha vyangyasya karatamiyat sarvartha vyanjakatvadhihi arthakara pradrishyate. Vyanjako va. Okay, va here is to tell. You can use the copper example, or you can use this simple example. Va means or. Vyanjakaha means the revealer. What is the revealer? Alokaha. Yatha, just as alokaha. Just as that light is the revealer. And vyangyasya, it of that which is revealed, akaratam iyat, it attains iyat, the akara, the form of that which it reveals. So light attains the form of that which it reveals. In the same way, sarvartha vyanjakatvat dihi, that intellect, being the illuminator of all objects, sarvartha vyanjakatvat, akara pradrishyate. That intellect, it illumines everything. It illumines everything and it grasps its form. And that's how we know. So just as the sunlight assumes the forms of the object with which it illumines, the mind assumes the forms of the object with which it perceives. So when the light is formless, it's actually formless. It doesn't have any form. And in the copper example, the copper is kind of liquidy. So this is a subtler example where the light doesn't have any form, so to say, but when the light shines on an object, it makes that object experienceable. When there's no light, we cannot experience the object. So all the objects might be here. They might be lying in front of me. They might be in this side and that side and all kinds of sides. But when the mind, or when the light rather, is not there, we don't have the experience of it. But the minute the light shines forth, we all of a sudden have this experience of the objects. It's as though the light envelopes those objects. And very interestingly, that if the light is encircled in some way, it will only envelope that encircled aspect, right? If it's encircled in some way, it envelope the encircled aspect. So the same way, the mind, all objects can be here, can be in front of us. Let them be there. But if the mind doesn't, so to say, go through and envelope that object, we will not have an experience of it. So the reason he's bringing these things up is he's saying, look, there is something called jīva sṛṣṭi. Because even if an object is outside, even if it's there, that's fine, but it can't be experienced. Forget the thought. Yes, we will have a happy thought or a sad thought when we experience an object. But the very experience of an object needs a thought. It needs a jīva. It's not going to happen just like that. So therefore, jīva sṛṣṭi is definitely there, on all levels. And when we understand this profound truth that we only experience things through a thought, then it gives us so much freedom, so much peace, actually. Because what is troubling us? What's troubling us is the thought of this and the thought of that. And when we don't think about it, we feel peace. Or sometimes when we think about something spiritual, we feel peace. So here it's really saying that the bondage, he'll come to the conclusion, but they say the bondage is really in the way we're experiencing. It's not in the object, it's in the way that we're experiencing the object. It's in the way that we're experiencing the person. That's what's happening. So now in verse 30, he describes whatever procedure I just told you. He describes it in verse 30, step by step. This is now where Sureshwaracharya ji comes in. So the copper example and the light example were of Adi Shankaracharya ji. Now here comes Sureshwaracharya. Maturmanabhinishpattihi nishpannam meyameti tat meyabhisangatam tacca meyabhatvam prapadyate. So he says, Maturmanabhinishpattihi. So matuhu. Matuhu here is pramatuhu. Of that reflected consciousness, manam, when it becomes united with the antakarana, with the inner equipment, when nishpattihi means when they become united. So reflected consciousness, step 1, reflected consciousness and the inner equipment, they unite together. Step 2, nishpannam meyameti chet. Eti. If they reach meyam, the object. Meyam means prameyam. So step 1, the reflected consciousness and inner equipment, they are united. And then step 2, they reach that object. Step 3, meya bhisangatam tatcha. Then what happens is they get connected. Sangatam, they get connected with that object. Meya bhatvam prapadyate. And they take the form of the object. This, we're saying this in steps, but it happens like this. It doesn't happen in all these steps. It happens like this. And keep remembering that mirror example, right? This is consciousness. The mirror is the mind or the inner equipment, and the reflection of consciousness is the reflected face. So naturally they're together. There's no separation there. When they go through, they get united, they go through that object, they envelope it, they take the form of the object. That's how knowledge takes place. So he says here, in the English is a little bit difficult, but what I explained to you is what it means. Out of the cognizer, cognition is produced. Thus born, the modification proceeds towards the object of the cognition until it gets in touch with the object, when it assumes the form of the object. The implications to this is manifold. Before we move on. One is, there's a reason why people are careful about what objects are around them. Because anything can trigger a vasana. So let us say, if somebody has a violent nature, and they see a violent show, that immediately can trigger a vasana, and that can create a deeper impression of violence. Somebody that has a vasana, let's say a vasana of thinking negative thoughts all the time. And if somebody is surrounded by that, let's say, news all the time, it can constantly trigger negativity. Constantly. And that's why our Upanishads and our Bhagavad Gita also say, they say, though objects are there, if you have the matching trigger, it will affect you. Same with spiritual objects or spiritual things, right? If there is a nice bhajan or kirtan or song going on, you have these spiritual vasanas or impressions, it will trigger, right? So the object outside may be the same for everybody. It looks the same for everybody. It looks the same, and that's why we can label objects, we can categorize them, we can place them somewhere, we can say what material they're made of, because from the outside they may look the same. But if I have some vasana in me which triggers that object in a certain way, then it can affect me. Right? So it might not affect everybody, but it can affect me. Like a beautiful bird flying in the sky, if somebody doesn't have this vasana for nature and beauty and peace, it's not going to affect them, really. But if they have it, it will trigger. So one is that care is taken care to what objects surround us. And 2, as I told you, is we only experience what we're really enveloping. So it just gives us time to reflect as to what are we really putting in our minds. Is it something that's going to make us more peaceful, or is it something that's just going to, again, destroy the peace and move it up and down? So finally here, Swami Vidyaranyaji says, there are two kinds. There are two kinds of objects. There's the material and there's the mental. And it's not only that there's Ishvara sṛṣṭi, but there is definitely jīva sṛṣṭi. And as he, concludes this portion, the question that is put towards him, in one of the commentaries is put towards him is, who knows Ishvara sṛṣṭi and who knows jīva sṛṣṭi? If you're going to conclude that there are two sṛṣṭis, there are two creations, who knows Ishvara sṛṣṭi and who knows jīva sṛṣṭi? So verse 31 now. Satyevam vishayo dvau sto gato mrinmaya dhimayo mrinmayo manameya syat sakshi vasyastu dhimayaha. Sati eva. Evam sati. In this way, dvau vishayo. There are two objects. There are two objects. Staha. There are two objects. Gato. And there are two pots. He says there are two pots. Mrinmaya dhimayo. Mrinmaya. One is called a mud pot and one is called a thought pot. Dhimaya. Okay, so one is a mud pot and one is a thought pot. Mrinmayo manameyaha syat. The mud pot is known through manameya, the process of knowledge. The mud pot is known through the process of knowledge. Sakshi bhasyastu dhimaya. And that thought, that mud thought, is known through sakshi. It's known through sakshi. So we see here there are two kinds of objects, the material and the mental. The material is the object cognized by the mind being modified by the form of the material object, and the mental is cognized by the witness consciousness as the jīva being affected by the material coming in contact with the mind and evoking its latent desire for enjoyment. So you have a pot. There's a mud pot, but there's also a thought pot. How does this work? So the first process, as we just described, right, is that mind and the reflection of consciousness that goes towards the object, envelopes it, takes the form that's called mud pot. Then I know mud pot. And that is known through the process of knowledge. It's a thought. But what is illumining this whole process? What is illuminating the thought pot? That's called sakshi, the witness consciousness. Sakshi. So this Ishvara sṛṣṭi, what this tells us is, who knows Ishvara sṛṣṭi? Who knows Ishvara sṛṣṭi? The thought. Ishvara sṛṣṭi, the experience of Ishvara sṛṣṭi takes place in the thought. But who knows jīva sṛṣṭi? Who illumines jīva sṛṣṭi? Sakshi. Sakshi is the illuminator of jīva sṛṣṭi. So now again, here is where we can pause, because jīva sṛṣṭi, to pause and think about this a little deeper. Jīva sṛṣṭi is illumined by sakshi. There are two sadhanas or two spiritual practices that we can take from this. The first spiritual practice or sadhana is of jīva sṛṣṭi is to keep that positive, keep ourselves surrounded by positivity, keep ourselves calm, balanced, and try to even control our thoughts. These are the initial stages of sadhana where we try to control our thoughts and we become aware, we become introspective, I would say. We become introspective. So if we feel like we're becoming too negative, we kind of, turn around. If we feel like we've said something wrong, we pause and we ponder over it. If we feel like we lost our cool, then, we apologize, we make up for it. So one level of the jīva sṛṣṭi is becoming more introspective about our thoughts, about what exactly is happening. But the deeper level of what to do with Jiva Sṛṣṭi is, we can just actually be a witness, remain as a witness. What is this practice of being a witness? And what happens when we remain a witness? Basically, it's just remaining as we are. And some people always ask the question, if we remain as we are, who will do all the work? Who will fulfill all the responsibilities? Who will get everything done? Just think of a tree. Now, a tree doesn't really have this ego. A tree doesn't have this ego that I'm blooming, I'm growing, I'm creating all these branches, I'm bearing fruit. It's just a very natural process. In the fall, the tree naturally turns its leaves. In the winter, naturally sheds its leaves. And in the spring, naturally blooms. It doesn't say I, it doesn't show off, it doesn't do anything. It's just a very natural process that's happening to this tree. And it will happen. It happens because its whole identity is so aligned with the cosmos. So when one remains as a witness, it's not that life stops. Life still goes on, but the body, the mind, intellect, and even that ego, they move in harmony with the cosmos. Absolute harmony, because you let it go, right? You completely let it go and just let it flow the way it needs to flow. It's okay. It's absolutely okay. And we begin to understand that everything is absolutely okay. If the body is growing, certain things are happening to the body, it's absolutely okay. Certain things are happening to the mind, it's absolutely okay. Because we begin to understand it's just flowing in the rhythm of the cosmos. And once we just open our arms and accept everything, it will bloom as it needs to. After some time of controlling, of fixing, of making things single pointed, we begin to realize that actually we cannot control so much. We cannot fix so much. The only thing we can do is surrender. That's the most powerful thing to do, is surrender. So while there's this Ishvara sṛṣṭi, which is there, we can't do anything with it. You just accept it, because you can't change. We can't change the sun, moon, stars, and we can't even change what's happening in the world so much. We accept that in the realm of Ishvara sṛṣṭi, all we can do is contribute. Contribute to make it more peaceful or harmonious, but we really cannot change it. Because the Jiva sṛṣṭi, the Ishvara sṛṣṭi rather, it depends on so many factors, not just you and me. Ishvara sṛṣṭi depends on so many people. You go to work, and yes, you could contribute to make things better, but remember, it depends on so many people's contribution as well. So we can't control that it's always going to go well. So when it comes to Ishvara sṛṣṭi, the sadhana is contribute and surrender. When it comes to Jiva sṛṣṭi, the sadhana at one level can be to direct thoughts in a positive manner. The sadhana at a deeper level can be just remain as a witness and let the body and mind and intellect flow in the harmony of the universe. Let it flow, and it's absolutely okay, and it's absolutely beautiful the way it is. So there's this Jiva sṛṣṭi, there's Ishvara sṛṣṭi, and this has been so far established. So now I'm just going to recap what we did today. more objections will come, but we'll see more of that next week. What we did today is really talked about how we know. We started with the objection that there is no such thing as jīva sṛṣṭi, and the Siddhante, or Swami Vidyaranya ji says there is definitely something, because even if you see the same person on the outside, there are different mental relationships with that person. From their side and from our side, there's different mental relations. So there's something called as a jīva sṛṣṭi, an individual's creation. And the objection was, I can accept jīva sṛṣṭi in delusion, in dream, in daydreaming, in memory, but in waking state, I don't see what your jīva sṛṣṭi is. And he says, well, let me tell you, actually, to know any object, you need the jīva. You need the jīva sṛṣṭi, because that thought has to, with a reflection of consciousness, has to go to the object, take its form, and then that's how we know. Just like copper is poured into a mold, or just like how light shines in objects, in the same way, that's how we know objects. So jīva sṛṣṭi is knowing the object, and also whatever vasanas it has, that its relationship with the object, its contact with the object. Ishvara sṛṣṭi is there. It's there, but it doesn't mean we experience all of it. It doesn't mean that we feel all of it. We only feel what we're connected to. We only feel what we get in contact with. And even what we get in contact with, we feel according to our vasanas, according to our past impressions. So therefore, there is such a thing as jīva sṛṣṭi. And he says, and then he goes over the steps. Step 1, reflection of consciousness with the mind. They unite, they're together. Step 2, they go towards the object. Step 3, they become connected to it. And step 4, they take the form of it. And therefore, he says, there are 2 objects. There's the mud pot and the thought pot. The mud pot, or the outside object, is Ishvara sṛṣṭi, and the thought inside is the jīva sṛṣṭi. And to know Ishvara sṛṣṭi, we need the thought of knowledge. But to know jīva sṛṣṭi, we only need that sakshi. Sakshi is the one that illumines it. And of course, all of this takes place in consciousness, right? But remember, the purpose we're discussing this is to get very, very close and understand the fact that bondage lies where? Not in Ishvara's creation, but in Jiva's. That's the main point of this whole discussion. More of it we'll take up next week. Okay? We'll close here. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.